I was a long-haul trucker for almost 10 years, and I've got my fair share of wild stories from those times too. They're not all bad, but I guess it's just harder to remember the good ones sometimes, and top of that, no one asks for the funny stories. They only ever want to know the crazy or creepy ones. And out of all the things that happened to me while out on the road, this one haunts me more than most. One of my main trucking routes was from Denver, Colorado to San Antonio, but with one stop in El Paso along the way. As anyone will tell you, driving through El Paso takes you under and over a hell of a lot of bridges. There's a strip where the 10 and the 110 cross that looks like spaghetti when you look at it on a map, and I was once driving in that area in the early hours of the morning, having just gotten back on the road to San Antonio. I was dead tired, wired on cheap energy drinks, and was just reminding myself of why I hated driving at night so much. When wham, something smashes into the windshield of my truck. On pure instinct, I slam my foot on the brakes, wrestling the wheel to make sure that I don't jackknife and tip over on the highway, and thankfully, I soon came to a complete stop. But there was still the issue of what exactly had hit me. So the second that I was sure that I didn't have any injuries, I jumped out of my cab and started looking around. Lying on the highway, a few yards back to my right, was a body. And since they came out of absolutely nowhere, there was one place that they could have come from. Above me. My first thought was that it was some kind of attempt to take their own life or something like that, like a double whammy of the fall then getting crushed under the wheel of my truck. They didn't go under the wheels though. They just smashed in my cab and tumbled off to the side, and as terrible as their injuries were, I knew that there was a chance that they might still be alive. I rushed over to where they were laying, trying to juggle dialing 911 with trying to get a response from them. They were in some pretty bad shape, but I could tell that it was a Hispanic guy in his 20s or 30s maybe. But then as I went about checking their vitals while talking to the dispatch, I realized this guy was dead. And not recently dead either. The dude was legitimately cold. I was passing that on to dispatch when I noticed all the saran wrap all over his side. He was lying on his side, so it wasn't obvious at first, but sure enough, someone had wrapped his torso in saran wrap in order to secure a large piece of paper to his chest. I didn't want to touch the guy. My Spanish isn't great, and I couldn't get a good look at what was written on the paper anyways, but I know enough Spanish to know that ja 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 is how Mexicans say ha ha ha, like laughter. And what little of the paper I could see was covered in those ja 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 ja's. The guy hadn't jumped off the bridge. It's pretty clear that someone had thrown him off, and whoever did it thought it was funny. I since learned that El Paso, along with almost every other border town, has a lot of trouble with cartel violence, but El Paso especially so. I was questioned by cops at the scene, and I had to get a guy out to change my windshield, so my overall journey was delayed by about 18 hours, but the eventual drive into San Antonio felt like an eternity. As you can probably guess, truckers have a lot of time alone with their thoughts. Sometimes that can be a good time, other times not so much. And that final leg of the journey over to San Antonio definitely fell into the not so much category. Like I said, I've seen some crazy things in my time as a trucker, but in terms of pure horror stories, that one just about covers it. I think it would have been a whole lot worse if the person had still been alive when I hit him, because even though I wasn't the one to toss him off the bridge, there'd still be that thought of, if I'd only picked a different route, or variations of that kind of train of thought, I guess. But still, seeing the laughter on that chest sign is something that kept creeping back in my mind on dark and lonely stretches of that highway. Every death is a tragedy in some form. As a God-fearing man, I believe that with all my heart. But then to think that there's folks out there who see death as the punchline to some sick joke, well, that's a thought that just about chills me to the bone. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.